Okay, this morning I'm going to show you kind of a quick overview of some options you could do for hosting your site. So you're probably familiar with traditional things like getting your own server and uploading your site there using MySQL database on the back end. And those options are totally valid, and go forward with those if you're comfortable with those. But let me show you some other options that might be different to play with, and it might also suit your needs real well. So the first thing I want to point out is GitHub has this feature called GitHub Pages. And essentially what it boils down to, we go to pages.github.com, go over here to pages.help, and it'll let you go and see what it's doing. But so I clicked on the creating project pages manually, and this is what it boils down to: is you would check out a repository, and then you would go and create an orphan branch called GHPages, and then you just go check in stuff into that branch as normal. And what happens here is GitHub is going to look at that branch, and it's going to actually serve up that content for you. And so you don't need to go and upload it to another server. It will just serve it as a website. Let's look at an example here. So here I have under my username, I have a repository named CIT261 Winter 2014, and in there I've created this GHPages branch. So essentially following the directions that they already have. And so what that does is this content, so I have an index.html page, which when I open it up, it's going to pop up a hello alert, and it's going to say hello world on that page. So to access this, you would you take your username, put that at the front. So we checkits.github.io / and then your repository name. And go to HTTP, not HTTPS. There you go. So see, it just hit that, it served up that index HTML page. So now, let's open that in a separate branch. So now if we go back to the actual repo and change it, you typically edit it and check it in, but you can also edit it on GitHub itself. So here, if I go and edit that, so you can see I edited it here, and if we refresh this page, it will typically take 1 to 3 minutes. But here you can see it's updated immediately. So I didn't have to go and redeploy it, or didn't have to repush it out to host. So GitHub Pages is a resource you can use. It's pretty nice, especially because you're going to be doing a lot of your logic in the JavaScript side of your app. So on the client side, then this is totally viable because GitHub, it will only serve static content, HTML files, CSS files, JavaScript files. So you can't put PHP files or Java or anything like that on the server, but you can still make it really useful. And here's how. So now imagine you use GitHub to serve up your static content, but you needed to save your data somewhere. You need to load it in from somewhere. So there's a website called Firebase. So you probably heard me talk about Firebase a couple times. Firebase is really nifty, where they essentially host a server, and you can sign up and get free accounts that'll let you store like 500 meg and like 2 gig of data transfer. So plenty for the purpose of this class. And honestly, the same thing that you would be reading and writing to their REST API, you can read and write to your own PHP written API as well. So this would just give you a quick way to get up and running, storing data, getting it in and out without having to write that backend, and then you could come back later and write your official backend. So really great for especially purpose in classes like prototyping things. Let me show you what that API can do. So you can just Google Firebase REST API to get the docs on how it works. But essentially, when you create an account, they're going to give you a custom domain, and so that'll be your special app. And then the end of the URL is where you save stuff. So I've created a really simple app here, and I'll check this in on GitHub so you can play with it as well. And so here's my simple app. Let's refresh it so you can see it. I've got an insert form where you put a name and an age, and you hit save, and it'll go and save a user. And then to go and look up a user, you can put in that ID and click get from Firebase, and it'll go and fetch it from Firebase. So let's demonstrate it before we look at the code. So my name is Clint. My age obviously is 73, and I save it. And so down here, So Chrome DevTools is built into Chrome. I really recommend you get familiar with them, and we can talk about them in class, office hours, things like that. Anyway, so here you can see that when I hit save, it did an options and a post. So those are two requests. And so if we click on that post, we can see that the payload was name Clint, age 73, time, specific time that I put in the code. And then the response was name and a given ID. And so you can see that I went and saved that ID here. And so we can go and get that from Firebase. And there it went and fetched it. So here we can go and see that request and response. It went and requested. So here's my special URL, user/did.json. And the response there was name, age, time. So the same thing that had been stored in Firebase, and then I wrote it out on the page. So you can see that IDs aren't numerical. Instead, they're GUIDs. They're a special ID that is unique to that time and space. And the reason they do that instead of doing numerical ones is because, let's say 20 people are using this page at the same time. You know, how does it know which number to give each person, right? So anyway, that's why you'll see these really ugly looking IDs. And maybe later this week I'll go and add in some code that goes and lists all the users in my database. Let me go show you what it looks like on the Firebase side. So if you just type in the URL that we navigated to, so in the case of mine was just brilliantfire.firebaseio.com. If you once you've created your account and you have your own URL, you can just type that in, and it'll ask you to log in. And since I've already logged in, I can see that. So not any random person can do that. And so here you can see as it's generated each ID, then it goes and puts them in this database, and you can interact with them and play with them. So let's say I change it to Brother Checkets. And so now I updated it here on this. Imagine this is like your database backend that you're playing around with. So now if I go and get from Firebase, notice how it went and fetched the new data from Firebase. So that's how that interaction works. So the code here is pretty simple. We've got just a form with the name and age field, and then a submit link. So let's go and look what just those three pieces are doing. And so to compare that, that's the name, age, and the submit link. And so when we start up the app, you'll see we go and add an event lister, call it init. So this is saying once the page is loaded, go and call init. Here's init. And then it goes and adds click event listeners to two different links, the submit link and the get link. And then these are the functions that are getting called when those get clicked. So when I click that save, which is that submit link, then it's going to go and fire this function called post to Firebase. And so we can go look at post to Firebase is right here. And honestly, I'm doing it really long-handed here. We could, and we'll probably refactor these into some helper methods and things like that later. But for now, it's good because you can just see everything going on right here. So when we click the link, it's going to fire a click event. So that event comes in. That's just the way JavaScript works. We're going to tell it to prevent default. So we're saying don't follow a link like you normally would. So prevent your default action. And then we go and create a person object. So this is a JavaScript object. That's a requirement in the class to figure out how to do those. Then we're going to go and get the name and the age values in the form. So there we can see name and age. We're going and grabbing them, putting those on our person object, as well as setting a time value just for kicks, so you can see how we do that. And then this is Ajax. This is how we do our communication to Firebase and really any backend. So we create an XML HTTP request object. We're going to go post to Firebase's REST API, make it asynchronous, so you can read up more about this. And really, office hours is a great place to bring up questions about this. We're going to tell it it's JSON, so it knows how to format it. We're not sending it across to PDF or HTML or something. And then we have the onReady state change. I'll come back to what that does. And then we actually go and fire it off. And we do this JSON.stringify. So this is built in the browser, and so you've probably seen us talk about JSON. And so this is taking a JavaScript object and serializing it or stringifying it. Essentially, it's going to turn this up here into a string that looks like this. So that's JSON. Okay. So we send it, and then we're going to just log out to the console. So built in, you've got this console object that you can go and just log stuff to. So that's a great place to write stuff out. So when that sends, then it comes back and looks at the onReady state change. So you should read up on this and understand it. But this ready state change is as like the communications going to the other server, waiting, getting a response, then then it will keep calling this function and keep telling it the new state. I go through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 meaning okay, I'm done, and status 200 means okay, it was a good response. You know, it wasn't a 404 or something like that, right? And so we go and parse it. Now this is JSON again. We're turning that text back into a person object. And go log it to the console if you want to see it. And they're going and setting up the look ID, the element with the value of lookup ID. And so that's how we're populating it down here. So you can see that. So that's an example method, so you guys can kind of see how these things map together. And if you're completely lost, then that's great, because we can talk about it. I can send you resources, and you can help each other out. Anyways, so with all that being said, remember how I have my GH pages? I'm sorry, right here. Now let's just go and check that in for kicks. Oops, that's the wrong command. So there's a REST Ajax file, so I'll go and check it in. I like using the Git GUI. And so if you've seen me demo this before, you can stage a file for commit. We'll say add Firebase examples. Go and commit it. Oh, we're on the wrong branch. We need to be on the GH pages branch, so that's something important to remember. Okay, gotta clear that up. Okay, so check out T to track it, GH pages, and you can do whichever. What's going on here? I'm missing all the branches. Oh, the stuff I committed on the master branch is not on the GitHub pages branch, so let's just cherry pick it on over. Don't worry about this. This is an advanced Git thing, but it gives me a way to grab something in another branch. And going over. Okay, great. And then we'll push it up. What? How did that happen? Okay, now we're pushing it up. And if we come over to GitHub, we can see that we got our Firebase example, REST Ajax HTML, and if we come over here, Firebase example, REST Ajax HTML. There's that site I created locally, and you can play with it here, and it will read and write stuff to the database, and eventually I'll add another feature. So obviously your app will be slightly different, more user-friendly than this, but it gives you an example of what code would do, and it gives you a place to start thinking about and asking questions, as well as you're discussing for your presentation this week about where we're going to store our app, where's it going to live, kind of demonstrate how GitHub Pages and Firebase could be a viable backend for you. That's it.